Welcome back, everybody, to Full Press Coverage Radio. This is the Full Press Coverage Steelers podcast. This is our episode 13. This is Parker Hurley, your host as always, with Brian Harker from Steelers Wire. So we'll bring in Brian and see how are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing good, Parker. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. We got a scorcher today in Pittsburgh. It's like plus 90 degrees. Trying to avoid the heat. Trying to talk about some Steelers football. They're coming to St. Vincent, Latrobe, Pennsylvania in less than 3 weeks, so we're getting really close to it. We're breaking down the entire roster as we have been all summer. We're starting to get to the nitty-gritty. We're on the defensive side of the ball. We finished off the offense. Check out all of our position breakdowns on Full Press Coverage Radio, where we hit the entire offense. But today it's the defense. We're heading to the defensive line. We're going to start it off with where we kind of just hit every single player, potential fringe players of the 53-man roster, some practice squad players, just kind of preview what we expect in training camp and into the 2018 season. And, we talk about the offense all the time in Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. But as crazy as that it sounds, this defensive line might be, from head to toe, the best unit on the entire roster. And people don't really talk about it as much, and it does sound crazy until you start to break down player by player, and we're going to do that and project what we could see this season. And it starts with Cam Heyward, who came off an injury. I believe he tore his pectoral the year before, played only 7 games, but last season was a wrecking ball. He talked about how mad he was that he missed time with the injury. Talked about they lost in the AFC Championship, and he just couldn't believe that he was not out on the field helping his team last season. Came out and put up 12 sacks, a career high. He was a Pro Bowler. He was in consideration for the All-Pro team. I wrote something on Full Press Coverage about how he should have been an All-Pro player if you look at tackles for loss and add in tackles for loss. And I also talk about the fact that the All-Pro voting is pretty much broken for a player like Cam Heyward because nobody factors in that he's a 3-4 defensive end, whereas almost every single All-Pro candidate to make the All-Pro team is a 4-3 defensive end. So Cameron Heyward should be kind of lumped in with 4-3 defensive tackles, but he has a defensive end as his position recognition. So he's out there with the sack masters. A guy like Everson Griffin, a Calais Campbell, players whose jobs are to, get around the edge and get sacks. That's not even Cameron Heyward's job. It's a completely different position. It's a completely different job. So he really gets kind of dinged up on some of the All-Pro voting and some of the accolades like that. But there's no doubt that in the 3-4 defensive end position, he was probably the best in the NFL last season, was probably an All-Pro player. So coming into the 2018 season, he doesn't have that chip from the injury, but now he has the chip from, he needs to build this defensive line. The defense was kind of the issue last season. Leonard Fournette ran all over them to end their season last year. So he still has the chip. I'm expecting just another step forward for Cameron Heyward. I'm expecting, because of the media finally catching on towards the end of last season, voting him to the Pro Bowl, him kind of getting back into the media's eyes after a lost season. I think that, next season he could really build on this, and he could break the mold and be one of those all-pro performers at the 3-4 defensive end position. Do you just see the similar type of, leaps and bounds production from Cameron Heyward? What are you expecting from Cam this season?
I could see where he could improve, and the only way he can really improve is just by staying healthy. I mean, and he just seems to have these bad luck injuries, but he is so skilled. He's almost taken for granted. Kind of like Aaron Smith was. Aaron Smith was great. Everybody in Pittsburgh knew what Aaron Smith did. And Heyward kind of falls in that same boat. He's just a machine. He goes out there and he does what he does. And the guy's versatile too. The people joked about, well, let's move Ryan Shazier to safety because he's getting hurt or he wasn't getting it early on in his career. Let's switch him to safety. Cam Heyward is that kind of a player where he gets it done. And because, like you said, he plays in a 3-4. The 3-4 guys, most defensive ends for Pittsburgh, have traditionally been, let's occupy blocks, let's make plays, let's make tackles. But it seems that over the last year or two, there's a push for them to actually start pressuring the quarterback. And this year in particular, with the philosophical change on defense, I think you're really going to see Heyward stand out, so to speak, on a national level. He can get after the quarterback. He can do it all. And yeah, we're going to see that. He'll make the Pro Bowl team this year, I think.
Yeah, I agree completely. And, you did talk about a weakness, two games that really stand out in my opinion, and I'm sure that they stand out to a guy like Cameron Heyward, against the Chicago Bears really early in the season. Whether it was Tarek Cohen, whether it was Jordan Howard, they were running to Heyward's side, and they weren't really afraid of that. And, the Jaguars game in the playoffs, they were running to Heyward's side, and, He can get upfield and he can penetrate, and those 12 sacks, like you said, the pass rush is more important than the run defense in my opinion. And that's why I think that, for a 3-4 defensive end, his job isn't even to pass rush. It's really to clear space, but he's getting that pass rush, and that's what I think is so impressive about him that puts him over some other players that a lot of people see, that the big name media types like to talk about. But he does have a few run deficiency woes. I know he's working on that, but you talked about it, how the ability to get pressure up the middle is becoming a big thing in the NFL, especially when it comes to rushing the passer. Everybody knows that, this is now the easiest way to get after Tom Brady is, just before he can even get to that third step, you have to be up the middle in his face. And the Steelers did that against the Patriots. They almost, coulda, shoulda, woulda won that game, and it really had to do with a guy like Cameron Heyward. He had a sack against the Patriots. So, you talk about, he struggled in the playoff game and against the Bears, but he had a big game against the Ravens. He had a big game against the Patriots, so he does show up for games like that as well. I really think that if he puts up similar sack numbers, you have to start considering for the All-Pro. And the All-Pro should obviously just change the way that they look at the positions, anyways. But that's another story for another day. On to Stephon Tuitt. He's entering his 5th season in the NFL. Really, it's hard to say because last season, he tore his bicep pretty early. Like the third play of the NFL season. And then he kind of missed 4 games, and he came back, and he was pretty good. He didn't really build on his third season. He kind of just plateaued from there. But if you really watch those first 5 snaps before Stephon Tuitt did tear his bicep, this dude looked like a man possessed. All the reports were coming out that, year 4 was just going to be the huge breakout year for Stephon Tuitt. Maybe his ceiling's higher than Cameron Heyward type of talk was coming out. Before Stephon Tuitt had that injury, like I said, he was fine last season. He was actually really good last season, but he didn't take the step forward that we were looking for. Do you really put most of that on the fact that 5 plays into the season, he has a major injury? Because he says that he's healthy now. He says that he's in the best shape of his life now. He says that pretty much everything you were expecting from last season is going to come out this season. So is that what you should be expecting because of this injury?
Yeah, Tuitt, his potential is unlimited. He's a 12-sack guy if he doesn't miss so many. I don't know how many sacks he's left out on the field, but just between that and staying healthy, this is the year he puts it all together. I think last year would have been the year. But his injury, he destroyed. In that opening series, he shut him down by himself. So if Tuitt can stay healthy, clean up some of his pass rushing deficiencies, which there ain't many, but take down the quarterbacks he gets in his drafts. This guy's a beast. And he probably has the highest potential of any defensive lineman on the roster.
I pretty much agree with that completely. It is hard to say, look at that one series and, it does sound like a homer with this prediction, but all the signs are pointing for Tuitt just to have this monster year last season. He did come back, early from a bicep injury. You're a defensive lineman. That's a lot of, leverage and pushing on that one specific area of his body. So, just for him to play through with it and still have that type of performance that he had last season, I just feel like you could really only imagine what he could do next season. And I really do think the sky's the limit for this type of player. And that's why, why I said earlier, when you start to break down this roster, you might have 2 Pro Bowlers right there, or 2 6, 7, 7-sack guys. Maybe Heyward has 10, Tuitt has 7, or Heyward has 11, Tuitt has 8. It could really be that type of season from these type of players. And when you're getting that from your interior, that's just absolutely huge. And that's going to bring us into the third guy, a guy that, if you've listened to this podcast, if you've listened to me and Brian back on Last Word on Pro Football, we both, and I've especially just been, really all over this guy, Javon Hargrave. I think he's just a great player. I think his first step is really big, and I think it's the fact that he's a former basketball player turned nose tackle. So he's just really not your Casey Hampton type of nose tackle anymore, and you really don't need a Casey Hampton type of nose tackle because teams are throwing the ball, and because, like I said, pressure up the middle is just so important. And, we go back to the Patriots. Tuitt's had, now 2 huge games against the Patriots. He had a big game at Heinz Field, and he had a big game in the AFC Championship. Javon Hargrave, I meant to say. But Javon Hargrave, the 3rd-round pick, he's entering his 3rd season. The real question that I have with Javon Hargrave is, how are we going to get this guy on the field a little more? You look at his rookie season, 492 snaps, 49.5% of them. You look at his second season, 455 snaps, 46.4% of them. So from year one, and he had 2 sacks in year one as a rookie, a 3rd-round pick. The arrow was definitely pointing up. He decreased in snap count played. Nonetheless, his production was the same, or if not improved. His PFF grade just shows that he's a very talented player. So there's something more to be driven out of Javon Hargrave in year 3. There's definitely more to be had, especially when it comes to sacks and when it comes to tackles for loss. The question is, how do you get that? I'm going to propose one idea that I'm just going to throw at Brian real quick, that I've just been tossing around. You keep the 3 defensive linemen on the field. Everyone's moving to a nickel base. Every team is now, because you're running 3 wide receivers, or you have a running back who can catch the football. So you have to have an extra defensive back on the field. The Steelers typically run a 2-4-5, where you would have Tuitt and Heyward in the middle. You'd have your 2 pass rushers, T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree on the outside. Those are essentially your 4 down linemen, and then you have your 2 linebackers, whether it be John Bostic, Vince Williams, whatever, would be your 2 linebackers in the middle. So I'm proposing maybe the Steelers switch more to a 3-3-5, where you keep Javon Hargrave on the field, and you just add 1 pass rusher, whether it be T.J. Watt or Bud Dupree. You have one of them rush. You put the other one back into space, and this is something that we've been talking about a lot. The fact that Bud Dupree can play the pass, he can play back in space. T.J. Watt is this freak athlete who, arguably is better off of the ball right now than he is actually rushing the passer. So you have these 2 guys, and the Steelers love the fact that both of these guys, one can drop, one can put his hand down. Why don't you completely take advantage of that and truly drop one of them back and truly have one of them put their hand down next to the 3 defensive linemen? And then you obviously have your 5 defensive backs, and you have 1 linebacker. It takes either Vince Williams or John Bostic off of the field, or Tyler Matakevich. Whoever it be, that's your weakest spot. So I just think that that's the best way, to get Javon Hargrave over half of the snaps played. So where do you stand on this type of idea? What do you think about that with Javon Hargrave? Do you think he needs more snaps?
I think Javon Hargrave, by all accounts, is doing what's necessary for him to be able to stay on the field. I mean, by all accounts, I don't know if leaner is the proper term for it, but he looks like he's cleaned himself up a little bit, in the sense that he understands that if I can make myself more versatile, if I can make myself more agile, they're going to keep me on the field because of what I can do. And yeah, he appears to be in much better shape heading into camp this year than at any point in his career. And like you said, he always had that quick first step. And if he truly has, if he can add to that first step and be a little quicker laterally, they'll have no choice but to do something like that, because you don't want to take him off the field if you don't have to. And like I say, he loves playing. He doesn't want to come off the field anyway. I think that would only help the defense on the first 2 levels. And now, if you're getting more pressure, if you're more productive on those first 2 levels, then the 3rd level of the defense is going to be that much better. So, yeah, I really like that idea of keeping him on the field, because I don't even think we've begun to see what Hargrave is capable of doing.
Right, and I think what's so great about having Stephon Tuitt and having Cameron Heyward, like we both talked about, they're such great pass rushers, but in this, technically it's a 4-man front, either one could slide out and be the quote-unquote defensive end. Either one could slide inside and be the quote-unquote defensive tackle next to Javon Hargrave, who's obviously, he's still pretty much your nose tackle. He can slide out and be, a 0-1-3 technique. He can play multiple spots against a center or a guard. You're not lining him up against a tackle. Stephon Tuitt and Cameron Heyward could actually have, some impact and some push against a tackle. They could definitely do that in pass rushing situations. That's what's so great about having two players as long and athletic as these two are. That's really what they provide. Another reason to, maybe potentially experiment with this, and this is going to bring us into the fourth guy. It's really a big four now when you talk about the Steelers' defensive line. Is the snap counts of Heyward and Tuitt. I'm talking about how do you get Heyward on the field, or how do you get Hargrave on the field more. Maybe you cut those two back a little bit. And it really started in 2015, and the Steelers noticed it, and they finally did something about it. But 2015, Stephon Tuitt played 89% of the team snaps. That was second in the league, and that was only behind Cameron Heyward, who played 976 snaps. That was 88% or 89%. So those two played the two highest snap counts in the entire league in 2015. You go into 2016, Cameron Heyward tears his biceps, Cameron Heyward tears his pectoral, Stephon Tuitt misses 2 games. You go into 2017, Stephon Tuitt tears his pectoral. So you understand that these two are playing way too much in the past. And now they've had their injury history now, and now you kind of want to limit that to Tuitt played 78% of the snaps last season. Cameron Heyward played 85%. You probably even want to get that down closer to 82%. So that's all of a sudden you're starting to look for a few more snaps. But one of the reasons why Javon Hargrave wasn't able to take advantage of the less snaps that Heyward takes, neither of them are going to take 88 to 8 or 9% anymore. Who was taking those extra snaps was Tyson Alualu, who actually was just, probably the best signing the Steelers had last season when you break it all down. Because he ended up playing 434 defensive snaps last season. He ended up playing in, I think it was 3 games that Stephon Tuitt missed at the very beginning of the season. He played in Week 17 against the Cleveland Browns as well. But, when Stephon Tuitt's healthy, he's playing, here's his snap counts, 14, 13, 7, 11, 15, 7, 11, 14, 18, 17. So he's playing, at least a decent portion of the snaps, about 25 to 30% of the snaps, and he's at least having an impact. I think you're going to see a little bit more of Tyson Alualu in the same type of role. Like I said, getting Heyward and getting Tuitt off of the field a little bit more. You're already designing, in my opinion, you have the potential to design a new role for Javon Hargrave to see more snaps, but now you also have the chance to get Tyson Alualu these extra snaps to ease the load of Tuitt and Heyward. So what do you think about that type of idea? Is that a good way to get both of them snaps? And do you think that Javon Hargrave maybe would be bumping a guy like Tyson Alualu for these snaps? Or do you think that it's kind of like I'm saying how Hargrave has his own role and now Tyson Alualu needs this reserve role?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Alualu is, he reminds me a lot of the Kimo von Oelhoffen.
We're bad with words today.
Kimo von Oelhoffen. Yeah. He reminds me a lot of that signing is similar. I mean, when he came in, he added versatility. Not like Alualu does, though. Alualu is. You used to have questions if Tuitt got injured. Oh man, what are we going to do? They're going to attack that side of the defense. Alualu, that's not the case. He could play all 3 positions if he has to, and his versatility is a plus for the defensive line. And if you could get him in there where you're preserving everybody, less snaps could actually equal more production. And I guess that would be the ultimate goal. Would be let's preserve everybody and keep everybody healthy for an entire season. Who knows how far the defense could take his team in the postseason? But Alualu is just, I don't know. He's a starter, really. That does a variety of roles. He's that super utility player along the line, and I'd love to see a rotation not based on need but based on opportunity. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, like you said, how, less opportunity may equal more production for some of these guys. And I really do think, Cameron Heyward, he's played so much, he's had his injury history, just get him, 80% is fine. It's really actually about the normal, whereas he's been, one of the top 5 highest snap players, him along with Stephon Tuitt. So ease their load a little bit. But still, like I said, I would like to see more 3 defensive line sets. So that is going to equal more Tyson Alualu. You talked about how he can play nose tackle if needed. And just one thing that I said when they signed him was that it's similar to Ted Ginn, where when you look at him as the top 10 pick, he's not what you want him to be. He's a bust, whatever, bad player. When you look at him based on the Steelers are paying him to be a backup defensive lineman, he's great. He's such a great value at his spot. So really good signing with Tyson Alualu. Really like what they're going to do with him. But like I said, it's going to be 3 defensive lineman sets, hopefully more often to get Hargrave some more pass rush opportunity up the middle. But it's also going to be, Alualu can only take so much off of Stephon Tuitt and Cam Heyward's plate. So, you have to start to look at the depth. Latarius Walton is the first guy we're definitely going to look at because he was definitely the next guy off of the bench last season. Still only played 144 snaps last season, it was 14%. He's another guy who can slide into the nose. You could argue that he may, if Javon Hargrave were to miss a game, he would probably be the starting nose tackle over Tyson Alualu because, like I said, Alualu is so valuable in his specific role of just being the backup to Heyward and Tuitt. So Walton's an interesting case. Do you think he has a pretty good chance to stay on the roster? Is there anything you saw last season that makes you think role-wise, position-wise, anything might change?
I think his role will pretty much be the same. And, with Walton, there's nothing really that stands out about him, but he just does what he's asked to do. And he goes unnoticed a lot of times, but, for a defensive lineman, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If he's not getting noticed, that means he's not getting violated by an offensive lineman or getting pushed out. So, he has to stay around. He'll be filling a similar role, and who knows? I mean, he has improved since he's been here. What he was a late round draft pick or an undrafted free agent. Either way, he wasn't that high, and he's carved out a nice niche for him along that front. So I don't see much changing with him. He's just that kind of guy that you can count on to come in and hold the line, so to speak.
Right, and he is he was a 7th round player from Central Michigan, and so it is his last year of his rookie contract. That's at least something to look into. Maybe they sign him to like a cheap 2-year deal in camp as well. That's something to look into. The next one that I did want to look at, it's pretty much the backup nose tackle position. And in my opinion, it's going to be down to 2 players here, and it would be Joshua Frazier from Alabama, the rookie 7th round pick, a player that Carl Dunbar, the Steelers' new defensive line coach, definitely knows a lot about. So he came from Alabama as well. So he's in competition with Daniel McCullers, who we all kind of know who he is at this point. I believe he was a 6th round pick from Tennessee, oversized player who kind of just plays smaller than he actually is. And the Steelers have been waiting to get something out of him. We were a little surprised that they even brought him back, but he's going to be in camp. He's going to compete for that same role. And the role really it's about 5 snaps per game, goal line defense, backup nose tackle type of stuff. Like you said, Alualu and LT Walton are really going to take over the majority of the nose tackle stuff if Hargrave were to get hurt. So this is really kind of, even if Hargrave gets hurt, he's still the backup nose tackle. That's just kind of what his role is. So do you see either player between Joshua Frazier or Daniel McCullers kind of standing out here? And do you have a favorite heading into training camp?
Yeah, I really do. I see Daniel McCullers standing out on Route 30 because he's no longer with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Josh Frazier, the kid was he was highly recruited coming out of high school. And, he goes to Alabama. He's seeing a lot of playing time as a freshman and he gets injured. And he got Wally pipped because then they had brought in freshmen that were better than him, which isn't not a knock against Frazier. Right. He just, he realized, okay, I'm not going to get the playing time I once got, not because I'm not good enough, just because these guys are better. So it's not a knock on him. Dunbar likes him, and they brought him in for a reason, and I think it was to help initiate McCullers' exit 230.
Yep. 100%. You're exactly right on this one. Look at the guys. Daron Payne was a top 15 pick. Jerron Reed is on the Seahawks now. A'Shawn Robinson starts for the Lions. These are guys who were drafted in the top, 60 picks in the NFL draft over their time who were starting over Joshua Frazier. So, Joshua Frazier, was hard for him to get on the field. There were, 4 or 5 top 60 picks on the field. So yeah, it was definitely tough for him. He's limited. His role is specific to what we were saying. But Daniel McCullers has never once been able to prove that he can do this role, even 4 or 5 snaps a game. So you got to get out of here, Big Dan. I'm with you. I'll be seeing him on the side of the road as well. I'm hoping Josh Frazier takes advantage of this. One other player that I definitely wanted to look at when it comes to the depth is Greg Gilmore from LSU. And he's an interesting player because, like we were talking about with Latarius Walton, he's a player who probably could slide into some of those nose tackle spots, but typically would play the defensive end spot. So I think that where it's similar competition between Joshua Frazier and Daniel McCullers, I think that Greg Gilmore is kind of brought in to push LT Walton a little bit. Like I said, it is his 4th year. Maybe you don't sign him to a contract. Maybe Greg Gilmore is a guy stepping in. The way that I would probably do it is put Gilmore on the practice squad for a season, let Walton play it out one season as a free agent, and then, decide at the end of next season whether, Gilmore could probably step in for his 2nd season. So is that kind of how you're seeing it? Do you think that Gilmore could push for a roster spot this year?
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, he has that ability to, like you said, push Walton off the roster potentially. I like the idea of putting him on the practice squad. I'm wondering, you remember, was it Josh Morrow they drafted out of Stanford?
Yep.
Or signed? And, I mean, I believe that kid's doing a pretty decent job now.
He starts somewhere. It might just be the Colts, but I believe he starts, yeah.
Yeah, and I would hate to see, I mean, I like Walton, don't get me wrong. But if Gilmore shows anything in training camp, I don't know that I'd be willing to risk putting him on the practice squad and losing him. I mean, if he can give you what Walton can give you, maybe it is time to say so long to Walton and bring Gilmore in. It's a nice potential problem to have. I'll say that. Yeah, he's an intriguing talent. He's an all-effort guy, and he's got some ability to him. And it's not a knock against Walton by any stretch of the imagination, but this might be one of those times where youth will be served.
Do you think there's a chance that you go with Gilmore and Walton and you leave McCullers and Joshua Frazier off of the roster?
Ooh. That's a good question. It's a nice question to have to ask.
Right, it would mean that the depth is actually playing out in training camp.
Yeah, I suppose that, I mean, there's not much difference between the 7th-round draft pick in a lot of cases and an undrafted rookie. I suppose that's possible.
Right, and it really is just, like we said, maybe 5 snaps a game if you're really looking at it. I don't think Gilmore or Walton is, quote-unquote a true nose tackle, but we also just said that, Javon Hargrave is absolutely not a true nose tackle either, so you like to have that one space plotter, that one guy who can kind of just plant his feet in the ground and not be moved. And that's more Joshua Frazier than anybody on the roster. But if Gilmore's showing, similar things, Walton can do it enough to where you could at least be happy with those two. I don't think it's crazy. I think it is probably, if I were doing it, I would probably try and get Gilmore onto the practice squad, but like you said, if he's showing enough to the point where you're nervous about it, there's not enough reason to keep LT Walton. I just think that probably for 1 year he actually is the better option than Greg Gilmore. Then there, just to round out the roster, there's Levon Hooks. Hooks has been around since 2016. Do you see this being a type of year for Hooks maybe to make some noise, or is he kind of? He just seems like a practice squad or practice squad training camp type of player, right?
Yeah, that's what he seems to be, and the Steelers like him enough to keep bringing him back. Maybe they're thinking, man, we hope this kid can show something. That's got to be part of the thinking anyway. Man, if this kid can do something, we keep bringing him back. We'd like to keep him around a little bit longer. Now, a lot of this could come down to a lot of these moves. I mean, what direction are the Steelers going towards on defense? I mean, they like big athletes, but they're going to more speed, and that could potentially play a role in who stays and who goes on some of these bubble players. If this guy can do the same thing and he's faster, well, that seems to be where the road they're going down. We want a faster defense that can make plays.
Right, and I do think that, we got the big 4, the 3 starters in Alualu, I think Walton knows that, with this depth, his job is not for certain. Hooks, McCullers, Frazier, Greg Gilmore, they're all right there. And Parker Cothran's another guy to mention. He went to Penn State, so the Steelers at least, know a little bit about him. He's another interesting player, a country kid from Alabama who, the Penn State Pro Day was just like one of the craziest athletic testing days ever. It was obviously led by Saquon Barkley, but just some real athleticism coming out of Penn State these last few years. So whatever they're teaching at those gyms is something wild. And Parker, he was one of those guys too. And he's a guy that, is big, not really a fast type of guy, maybe a Joshua Frazier. And you talked about it. Not a huge difference between your 7th round pick and your priority undrafted free agent. So maybe Parker Cothran pushes Frazier or McCullers. So like I said, when you break this thing down, it's one of the deeper units, top to bottom. It's probably the best unit on the roster. Anything else you want to touch on when it comes to this defensive line?
Yeah, maybe there's another prospect named Kendall Vickers. He's a defensive end out of Tennessee, and he's got good strength. He's not going to wow you athletically, but he's a Dunbar kind of guy, a John Mitchell kind of guy. The kind of player they love to coach up because his effort is good. He's willing. Now, will he probably make the roster? No, but he's a guy I'd like to see hit the practice squad for sure.
So if we had to say, let's just say that based on our roster, we had the top 3 starters. Alualu makes it. LT Walton makes it. And then we do have Joshua Frazier over Daniel McCullers. So between Levon Hooks, Greg Gilmore, Kendall Vickers, and Parker Cothran, how do you rate the 4 on how much you're trying to get each of them to the practice squad?
Gilmore is my top priority out of all of them. Parker Cothran, is that his name?
Yeah.
He'd be number 2.
Right.
And then I would put Hooks and Vickers. They'll be back. I would say they'll both be back next year in camp. I don't give much of them any hope of making the roster.
That's about exactly as I would put it too. So there's 11 defensive linemen right there, and Hooks has been on the practice squad the past couple years, so there's really 10 guys that have whether it be practice squad or the actual roster have some real chances here this offseason. So the defensive line is going to be buzzing in St. Vincent at training camp. That's going to be a position to watch for. Whether it be is Cameron Heyward going to make the All-Pro, or whether it be, is Greg Gilmore going to make this roster? Is it Latarius Walton? How does Levon Hooks do in a do-or-die type of year? How does Daniel McCullers do in a do-or-die type of year? Just a lot of storylines are going to be buzzing around this defensive line heading into the season, so it's definitely going to be, like I said, just a really interesting position. I'm really excited about it. That'll wrap us up for today. We'll get back at it next week. Like I said, training camp's coming up. We got to fit in edges, linebackers, and the defensive back group. So we'll be coming at you rapidly here, probably right after the 4th of July here. So you guys take care. That was Brian Harker. Check him out at Steelers Wire now. I'm Parker Hurley at Full Press Coverage. As always, we will talk to everybody next week. You have a good one.